I can't stand this shit, man. There is no better representation that like all the culture war stuff that these guys, all the culture war battles that these guys fight are simply violent distractions and have been used as a way to make people look the other way on their inability to address the actual crises that people voted for Donald Trump. Like another great example of this is immigration, right? Donald Trump is talking about, open borders, open borders. New. Reuters uncovers that the Trump admin is prosecuting the lowest number of drug trafficking cases in decades. Oh my God. How strange, you might be saying. Maybe it's because Donald Trump is actually actively stopping border crossings from taking place. Nope. That's not the reason. The reason is because the Trump admin has diverted so many law enforcement resources away from drugs to going after random fucking migrants instead. Brad Heath says the number of people charged with breaking federal drug laws dropped to the lowest levels in decades this year after the Trump administration ordered enforcement agencies to focus on deporting immigrants. Okay? More drugs were seized in August 2025 than in August 2024. Fentanyl flow is down, but that's been ongoing for almost 2 years now. Cocaine is coming in as normal. Meth appears to be on the upswing. Lots of drugs are still being seized. There is no evidence that a drop in drugs coming into the U.S. in part because of the overwhelming majority of hard drugs make it into the country at legal ports of entry or through tunnels or boats, neither of which have been impacted by a drop in migration, something that we said over and over again, by the way, because drugs were not actually being trafficked in the pockets of otherwise law-abiding abuelas that were crossing the fucking border. Drugs were coming in through regular ports and regular points of entry, okay? That was the Department of Homeland Security's own data. That was the Customs and Border Patrol's own data that showed that reality, for the record. I wonder if there was a fucking political commentator who kept repeating this point over and over again, the notion that, like, mass deportation was somehow going to, or a more militant response for border crossings was somehow going to magically evaporate the drug trade. I said it. I said it to any congressperson that would listen to me. I was like, this is so stupid. Why is nobody talking about that? New, for the first time ever, the largest group of people arrested in the interior and detained by ICE are people with no criminal record, by the way. As of yesterday's data release, 40% of those arrested in the interior and detained by ICE had no prior conviction or pending charges. By the way, this doesn't even mean that the people that were being apprehended with prior charges were being apprehended for severe crimes. Make no mistake, trespass or traffic violations, things of that nature are considered prior charges, okay? So they use that to beef up the stats. So if you look at like the actual violent crime apprehension, that number, I'm willing to bet, has not gone up dramatically at all, as opposed to migrants arrested at the border or an airport and sent to detention. So looking at those arrested by ICE versus Customs and Border Patrol is a proxy for those arrested as a part of the internal enforcement operations. Oh, in the interior means, for people that are wondering what that means, there are interior deportations that are happening in the regular, streets of Los Angeles or the streets of Chicago and places like that, as opposed to the Customs and Border Patrol apprehensions, which happen usually at in or around the border, like the border crossings that you see, or at an airport, for example. CBP apprehends at the airport. Wrong. First, criminal record means a prior arrest or conviction, not having committed a crime for which a person wasn't ever arrested. If it was the latter, nearly every American would have a record. Second, visa overstays, haven't committed a crime. While the latest data does not contain a detailed breakout, we know that historically the majority of people with prior convictions arrested by ICE have low-level misdemeanors or violations. Less than 10% of those detained have violent felonies. Okay? So remember that. Remember that when you're looking at these numbers. So when you look at like prior convictions or pending criminal charges, as opposed to no criminal record whatsoever, even the prior conviction or pending criminal charges are oftentimes, 90% of them are low-level offenses, and only 10% of them are violent criminal offenses. If you look to the actual apprehension and the actual detention or the prosecution, there is no world in which, under the Biden administration, when an undocumented migrant was responsible for a violent or heinous crime, that they just were immediately released because of fucking woke. That's not a thing that ever happened. And yet, for some weird goddamn reason, no fucking Democrat leading up to the election or even before the election ever addressed that reality. No Democrat went up on stage at any point and said, the fuck are these Republicans talking about? You think when someone is a is a rapist, a serial killer. We just let them go because they're Guatemalan. Like, what are you, fucking stupid? Of course they get prosecuted and apprehended and detained permanently. Depending on the severity of the crime, they are either they are either thrown in prison under the U.S. criminal justice system or sometimes deported if it's not as significant of an offense. This is a crisis of misinformation. This is a crisis of lazy leadership. This is a crisis of scared leadership on the Democratic side. It's very, very frustrating. Being present unlawfully is a civil immigration law violation punishable by possible deportation, not a federal crime punishable by jail. The exception is people previously deported whose presence in the U.S. after illegal reentry is a crime. This is an immigration lawyer having to address all of the regular points of confusion in this circumstance. The average time for a detained immigration court case has been measured in months for many years. In this case, the data is consistent and has been produced in this format for multiple years. I track it regularly. There's no sign of manipulation. 40% is already scandalously high. The data is from ICE until it can be independently verified. There's little reason to believe it's accurate. That data is not available, but one of the main... How many people detained were here legally with papers in the process of getting permanent status? How many were arrested as they were reporting to the court for asylum and other cases? That data is not available, but one of the main reasons we've seen the dramatic spikes in arrests of people with no criminal records is the immigration court arrests and the Los Angeles raids, which you can see reflected in the data around June. Being here illegally is a criminal act, which these fucking idiots repeat over and over again. Aaron Reichlin Melnick says, completely false. And if you don't believe me, here's the Supreme Court saying it. As a general rule, it is not a crime for a removable alien to remain present in the United States. Why? One must ask the question, why? Why is this not considered like some heinous fucking crime? Because this is a crime oftentimes born out of a lack of proper paperwork. The real crime is the government refusing to give these people the proper documentation. These people are not doing anything wrong. They're not doing anything wrong. It's like getting mad at fucking jaywalkers and saying that they're destroying the social fabric. It's fucking ridiculous. You have to present an argument as to why having these people work inside of the boundaries of the United States is actually bad. No one ever makes that argument beyond a bunch of vague gesturing in the form of, oh, they're destroying the culture or they're parasitic and they're fucking destroying America. It's all just like white nativist bullshit. Not even remotely, no criminal records, stay in the country for your loophole, not even remotely. But what this shows us is that the administration's claim to be focused on the worst of the worst is utter propaganda. In reality, Stephen Miller told ICE to stop focusing on people with criminal convictions and instead hit quotas. This is also true. Anyway, as with many other issues, if that gets relitigated, you're looking at a 6-3 overturn. No, not even remotely likely. In that excerpt, Supreme Court was straightforwardly describing the criminal laws of the United States, not issuing a contested ruling. You're welcome to look through the criminal code. You won't find a general crime of being here unlawfully. Okay? It makes no sense. That is part of the reason why these guys want to make it a heinous crime. They want to elevate it to felony status, for example, as they did in the first Trump administration. The point of contention is that if you want to elevate like illegal crossings or visa overstayings as a felony in and of itself, you have to present an argument as to why visa overstaying or crossing the border illegally, okay, without having the proper paperwork is a severe crime. You can't just like present it and be like, oh, they're breaking the rules. That's a fucking idiotic way to do things, right? Except we're a nation of stupids, and therefore it's obvious that you can kind of get away with doing this kind of silly thing. You can lean into the worst fears of tribalistic people who don't even realize that they're surrounded by people that don't have the proper clearance or the proper authorization to work in this fucking country.